The colony streets were dark that night, filled with shadows of tall buildings and the soft hum of broken neon lights. The air was cold, carrying the smell of rust and smoke. Most people hurried past, holding their cloaks tight, avoiding any reason to stop. No one had time for the weak or the forgotten, but one man, a human with tired eyes and rough hands, walked slower than the rest. His name was Daniel, and though he had little, he carried a heart that refused to turn away. As he walked through the market alley, he noticed movement near a pile of empty crates. At first, he thought it was some animal searching for scraps, but then he heard a sound, soft, shaky breathing followed by a cough too weak to belong to anything fierce. Daniel stepped closer, and in the dim light, he saw them. Two small alien girls sat pressed against each other, their clothes torn, their skin pale from hunger. Their eyes were wide, shining in fear, but also empty in a way that only starvation could bring. The younger one, barely more than a child, hid her face in the older sister's chest. The older one looked up at Daniel, her lips trembling as she tried to speak. No words came, only a dry gasp. Daniel froze. He had seen beggars before. Every colony had them. Most people ignored them because helping was a risk. Maybe they carried disease, maybe they were thieves, maybe they were marked by gangs. But something in the girl's eyes stopped him. They weren't the eyes of a thief. They were the eyes of someone who had been invisible for far too long. Slowly, he crouched down. "Are you hungry?" he asked in a quiet voice. The older sister blinked, then nodded once. Her voice finally broke free, though it was nothing more than a whisper. "Please. Food." Daniel's chest tightened. He reached into the small bag slung over his shoulder. Inside were 2 rolls of bread, still warm from the baker, and a little container of stew he had saved for his own dinner. He thought about his long day of work, about how his stomach already ached with emptiness. But looking at the girls, that hunger didn't matter anymore. He pulled out the bread and held it out. The younger one peeked from behind her sister and stared at it with desperate eyes, but she didn't move. The older girl hesitated too, as if she feared it was some cruel trick. "It's all right," Daniel said softly. "Take it, it's for you." When the older sister finally reached forward, her hand shook so badly she almost dropped it. The moment the bread touched her fingers, the younger one snatched it and bit into it, chewing so fast she coughed. Daniel quickly handed them the stew, placing it carefully in their lap. The steam rose, and for the first time that night, their faces lit up with something more than fear. As they ate, Daniel watched. He noticed their faces under the dirt, delicate features, strange markings across their cheeks that looked like faint silver lines glowing softly in the dark. They weren't human, but they were beautiful in a fragile, broken way. The older sister tore pieces of bread to feed the little one first, taking only small bites for herself. "What are your names?" Daniel asked. The older girl paused, looking at him as though the question itself was dangerous. Finally, she said, "My name is Arya, and she is Lyra." "Arya and Lyra," Daniel repeated, letting the names settle. "Beautiful names." The younger one looked up at him with crumbs on her lips. Her voice was soft, almost like a song. "Thank you for helping us." Daniel felt a warmth in his chest that the cold night couldn't take away. But behind that warmth was sadness. Why were 2 children left alone in a place like this? What kind of galaxy abandoned its young? "Do you have anywhere to go?" he asked carefully. Arya shook her head, holding Lyra closer. "No home, no family, only us." Her voice cracked, and Daniel could see the weight of those words crushing her small shoulders. For a long moment, Daniel didn't know what to say. He was just a worker, a man with barely enough for himself. He lived in a tiny rented room at the edge of the colony. He didn't have money to change their lives. But tonight, at least he could give them one thing: warmth, safety, and a little hope. "You can come with me," he said finally. "Just for tonight, it's not much, but you won't have to sleep in the cold." Arya's eyes widened and Lyra clutched her sister's arm, whispering something Daniel couldn't hear. After a moment, Arya nodded slowly. We will come. Daniel stood, offering his hand. Arya hesitated, then placed her small hand in his. Lyra followed, holding tightly to both of them. Together they walked through the empty streets, 3 shadows against the neon glow. And though Daniel didn't know it then, that single act, the sharing of a warm meal, was about to echo across 10 long years, leading to a future he could never imagine. Daniel's small rented room was not much. The walls were cracked, the ceiling leaked when it rained, and the heater rattled more than it worked. But compared to the cold streets outside, it was a palace for the 2 little girls who entered behind him. Arya and Lyra looked around nervously, their big eyes scanning the broken chair, the small table, and the single narrow bed pushed against the wall. It was nothing, yet to them it seemed everything. They stood frozen at the doorway until Daniel gently guided them inside. "Sit," he said softly, pointing at the bed. "You can rest here tonight?" The girls sat close together, holding each other's hands tightly. Lyra's small body shook, not just from cold but from the habit of fear. Arya tried to hide her worry, but her eyes betrayed her. She had learned to act strong, but she was still only a child. Daniel opened the cupboard and found an old blanket. It was rough and patched, in places, but it would keep them warm. He wrapped it around them, and Lyra sighed, pressing her face into the fabric. For the first time, Daniel saw their shoulders relax. He sat at the edge of the table, watching them quietly. He wondered where they came from, who their parents had been, and what cruel twist of fate had left them here abandoned, but he didn't ask. Sometimes questions hurt more than silence. Arya spoke first. Her voice was soft, as though she feared her words would vanish into the air. "Why? Did you help us?" Daniel blinked at her. "Because you needed it." "No, one else did," Arya whispered. She looked down at her hands, dirty and small. "People see us every day. They walk past us. Some throw stones, others call us names. But no one ever stopped. Not until you." Her words cut deeper than any blade. Daniel felt a sharp ache in his chest. He had always believed kindness was simple. Help when you can, share what little you have. But hearing that no one else had, given them even a glance, made him realize how rare such a simple act could be. "You remind me," he said slowly, "of someone I once knew. A little sister. She's gone now. But when I saw you both, I thought of her. I couldn't just walk away." Arya's lips trembled. She nodded once and pulled Lyra closer, as if promising herself that she too would never walk away from her sister. The night grew colder outside. The wind rattled the broken window, but inside the room was warm with the soft rhythm of breathing. Lyra fell asleep first, her head on Arya's lap. Arya stayed awake longer, staring at Daniel as if trying to memorize his face. "You gave us food," she said finally, her eyes heavy with exhaustion. "And a place to sleep. I will not forget this. I promise." Daniel gave her a tired smile. "You don't need to promise anything. Just stay safe." But Arya shook her head. "No, I will remember. I swear it." Her words carried a weight too heavy for someone so young, and yet Daniel could feel the truth in them. She was not speaking like a child. She was speaking like someone who had survived too much pain, someone who had already decided to fight for the future. By morning, the sun slipped through the cracks in the window, painting the room in pale gold. Daniel woke to find the bed empty. His heart raced as he stood quickly. The blanket lay folded neatly on the chair. Arya and Lyra were gone. He rushed to the door, stepping into the crowded street, scanning every face, but they were nowhere to be found. The people pushed past him, merchants shouted, and the colony buzzed with its usual noise, as if nothing had changed. But for Daniel, something had. He walked back slowly, holding the folded blanket in his hands. It smelled faintly of smoke and dust mixed with the sweetness of bread. His room felt emptier than before, though it had always been empty. For days he searched. He asked around, but no one knew of two alien girls. Some laughed at him, others shrugged. One man even warned him not to waste time on street rats. Daniel turned away in anger. Each night he sat at his small table, staring at the folded blanket, replaying their faces in his mind. Lyra's soft smile, Arya's trembling promise. I will not forget this. 10 long years would pass before he knew if those words had been true. But in his heart, Daniel already felt that promise had the power to reach across galaxies. The days in the colony turned into weeks, and the weeks turned into years. Daniel's life followed a rhythm as dull as the machines he worked on. He fixed broken engines in the docking yards, hauled crates for merchants, and sometimes repaired small shuttles for extra credits. It was enough to survive, but never enough to rise above poverty. Every morning he woke up in the same small room with cracked walls and the same rattling heater. And every night before lying down, he looked at the folded blanket that still rested on his chair, the one Arya and Lyra had used. He never threw it away. To him, it was proof that they had been real, not just some dream of kindness, but the faces of the girls refused to fade. He remembered the way Lyra's hands shook when she tore the bread, the way Arya's voice carried a weight far beyond her years. Most of all, he remembered her promise. I will not forget this. Daniel wanted to believe those words, yet doubt crept in as the years stretched on. What if they hadn't survived? What if his small act of kindness had been their last warm meal before the galaxy swallowed them whole? The thought haunted him like a shadow that never left. The colony itself changed, slowly. New buildings rose, old ones collapsed. The wealthy merchants built taller homes while the poor sank deeper into hunger. Daniel remained stuck somewhere in between. He was neither rich nor starving, just invisible, like most humans in alien-controlled sectors. One evening, after a long shift in the docks, Daniel sat at a small food stall. He ate plain stew, tasteless but filling, while the crowd around him buzzed with conversation. At another table, a group of men laughed loudly, boasting of profits and new trade routes. Daniel paid them no mind until he heard one line. They say the Orphan sisters are building a fleet, one merchant whispered. Young rulers, brilliant strategists. They rose from nothing. Now even empires respect them. Daniel froze, the spoon halfway to his mouth. Orphan sisters. The name echoed in his mind, like a key unlocking an old memory. He thought of silver lines glowing faintly on young cheeks, of two girls clinging to each other in the cold. Could it be them? No. He shook his head. It was impossible. The galaxy was vast, filled with countless orphans, countless stories of survival. Why would those two small children rise to power? Why would they even remember a man who gave them bread, once? Still, the idea rooted itself in his mind. That night, as he lay on his bed, he imagined them older, stronger, standing tall in shining armor, leading fleets across the stars. The thought almost made him smile, even if it was only fantasy. The years dragged on. Daniel's hair began to gray. His back ached more each morning. He spoke less, laughed less, but he worked just the same. To the people around him, he was just another tired human laborer. No one knew of the memory that burned quietly inside him. Sometimes he would see other children in the streets, thin, hungry, ignored. He helped when he could, slipping them food or coins, but he never saw Arya or Lyra again. Their absence became like an old scar. It no longer bled, but it never disappeared. On the 10th year, Daniel found himself walking through the market during a heavy rain. The neon lights flickered against the wet ground, and merchants covered their goods with plastic sheets. Daniel moved slowly, his coat soaked, when he heard a loud commotion. People rushed toward the docking yards, pointing at the sky. A royal vessel, someone shouted. Look at the size of it. Daniel turned his head. Through the rain, a ship descended, massive, gleaming, far too beautiful to belong to any merchant. Its silver hull glowed like liquid light, and symbols of power were etched across its wings. The ground shook as it landed, scattering water in waves. Crowds pressed forward, eager to see which lord or ruler had come. Daniel watched too, though, with little interest. For 10 years he had learned not to expect miracles. Ships came and went. Rich men flaunted wealth. None of it ever touched his life. And yet, as the vessel's ramp lowered, Daniel felt something strange, a whisper of memory tugging at his heart. He couldn't explain it, but he stood frozen, staring at the light spilling from inside. The people gasped, whispering names he didn't hear. Daniel only knew one thing. After 10 years of silence, after nights of doubt and days of endless labor, the promise of 2 orphan girls was about to return to him. But he didn't know whether it would come as salvation or as something far more dangerous. The colony was buzzing like a hive the next morning. Everywhere Daniel went, people were whispering about the great ship that had landed in the docking yards during the storm. Merchants spoke of it with trembling voices, workers repeated rumors like prayers, and children ran through the streets, pretending to fly in its shadow. "They say it belongs to a royal family," one woman muttered near the bread stall. No, it's a warship," another corrected. "Built with technology not even the Empire can match." "I heard it's the Orphan sisters," whispered a man, his eyes wide. "They've come to choose allies." Daniel carried his tools across the street, pretending not to listen, but every word pierced his thoughts. Orphan sisters. He had heard that name before, years ago in passing. The rumor that 2 young leaders had risen from nothing, building influence across the galaxy. He never believed it could be Arya and Lyra. It was too much like a dream, too much like hope. Still, he found himself drawn to the docks that evening. The ship towered above the colony buildings, silver and flawless, its surface glowing faintly as though alive. Guards in polished armor stood at the base of the ramp, their weapons shining with plasma edges. Ordinary people dared not come too close, but they gathered anyway, staring from a distance. Daniel stayed in the crowd, his hood pulled low. He didn't want to be noticed. He just wanted one look, one clue to feed the burning question in his mind. Then he heard it. A voice, clear, calm, and commanding, spoke to the guards. He couldn't make out the words, but the sound froze him. It wasn't the high, trembling tone of a child anymore, but there was something familiar in it. Something that made his heart slam against his ribs. He left before he could see more. His hands shook as he returned to his room. That night he didn't sleep. He sat at his table, staring at the folded blanket as rain tapped against the window. Could it be them? After all, these years? Could Arya's promise have been more than a child's desperate vow? By morning, the rumors spread even faster. People claimed the ship was not here for trade or war, but for something personal. "The sisters are searching for someone," one merchant said with a sly smile. "A man, perhaps. A human." Daniel's heart stopped at those words. He told himself it was coincidence. There were many humans in the colony, many men who might be of interest. And yet, when he walked through the market, he felt eyes on him. It was as though the air itself was waiting, holding its breath. 3 days passed like that. The ship stayed docked, its silver frame glowing at night like a second moon. Rich merchants tried to approach with gifts, but the guards turned them away. Officials offered alliances, but the visitors remained silent. No one knew why they had come, and that made the mystery even greater. On the 4th night, Daniel was returning from the docks, his body sore from lifting crates. As he neared his small room, he noticed something unusual. The street was empty, too empty. The usual merchants, beggars, and drunks were gone. Even the air felt strange, heavy with silence. And then he saw it. A glow at the far end of the street, soft and silver, moving closer. The light was not harsh like neon or fire. It was warm, almost alive, wrapping the shadows in quiet brilliance. Daniel froze, his breath caught in his throat. From the glow, 2 figures appeared. Tall, graceful, wrapped in cloaks that shimmered like woven starlight. Their faces were hidden, but Daniel felt a pull, like a memory rising from deep inside him. His hands clenched, his heart raced. The figures stopped before his door. One of them lifted her hood slowly, revealing eyes that glowed faint silver just like the markings he remembered on a cold night 10 years ago. Aria. The name burst inside his chest, though his lips didn't move. She was no longer the fragile girl who once trembled in hunger. She was radiant, her gaze sharp and steady, carrying the strength of a queen. Behind her, Lyra lowered her hood too, smiling softly, though her smile carried power now instead of fear. "Daniel," Arya said, her voice calm but filled with emotion. "We have come back." The street seemed to vanish around him. The years of doubt, the lonely nights, the scar of emptiness, all melted in a single moment. But along with recognition came another feeling. Fear. Because nothing in the galaxy came without a cost. If Arya and Lyra had risen so high, if they now commanded ships and armies, why had they returned to him? As the silver glow wrapped around his small doorway, Daniel realized one truth. His quiet, forgotten life was over. The promise of 2 orphans had come back, and with it a destiny he had never asked for. Daniel stood frozen at his doorway, unable to speak. 10 years of silence had broken in a single moment, and the 2 figures before him were no longer the starving children he once sheltered. They were powerful women now, their presence glowing like stars against the dark street. Arya stepped forward first. Her cloak shimmered as she moved, and her silver-marked face caught the faint glow of the ship's light above. Lyra followed, her eyes softer, yet equally radiant, filled with warmth and strength. Daniel's lips parted, but his voice failed him. All he managed was a whisper. "It's really you?" Arya's gaze softened, though her posture remained regal. "Yes, Daniel, it is us. We kept our promise." Lyra smiled, the same smile that once peeked from behind crumbs of bread, though now steadier, filled with quiet confidence. "We told you we would not forget, and we never did." Daniel stepped back, still stunned, as if his small room was unworthy of their presence. But they entered anyway, filling the space with an aura that made the cracked walls and broken heater seem even smaller. They sat at his table, the same table where once he had placed a container of stew. Memories crashed into Daniel. He saw Lyra trembling as she ate, Arya whispering promises through exhaustion. He remembered how quickly they had vanished the next morning, leaving only a folded blanket behind. His heart ached, but now it was mixed with wonder. "I thought," Daniel began, his voice shaking. "I thought you didn't survive. I thought maybe I only imagined you." Arya shook her head slowly. "We survived, Daniel. We endured because of you. That one night, it gave us strength. You fed us when no one else would. You gave us warmth when we were invisible. That memory became our fire." Lyra leaned forward, her voice gentler. "When we were taken away, we swore to each other that we would rise, we would fight. And one day we would return to the man who gave us hope when we had nothing." Daniel swallowed hard, his hands trembling. "But look at you. You're leaders now. You command ships, armies. Why would you come back to someone like me?" Arya's silver eyes locked onto his. "Because everything we are, everything we became, began with you. Without that night, without that meal, without that kindness, we would have broken. You may not see it, Daniel, but you planted the seed of who we are today." Silence filled the room, heavy and overwhelming. Daniel tried to process their words, but it felt impossible. How could something so small, so simple have grown into this? He remembered giving away bread he could barely afford, sharing a blanket that was patched and worn. To him, it was nothing more than decency. To them it had become destiny. Lyra reached into her cloak and pulled out a small object. It was a locket, crafted from silver metal with faint glowing lines. She placed it on the table before him. "We made this to honor the night you saved us," she said softly. "Inside is the symbol of our house, but it is also the memory of that bread, that warmth, that promise. You are part of our story, Daniel. Forever. Daniel's throat tightened. He wanted to speak, to thank them, to tell them how unworthy he felt. But words failed. He looked at the locket, then at the two women before him, and all he could do was breathe their names. Arya. Lyra. Arya stood again, her voice steady but carrying emotion. We came not just to thank you, Daniel. We came to bring you with us. The galaxy knows us now, but they will know you too, the man who gave hope to two forgotten children. Daniel's heart pounded. Bring me with you? Lyra nodded, her eyes bright. Yes, we owe you more than words. We owe you everything. You will not live forgotten anymore. For a long moment, Daniel just stood there, torn between disbelief and fear. He had lived 10 years as a shadow, quiet and invisible. The idea of stepping into the light, into the center of power, terrified him. Yet looking at Arya and Lyra, he felt something stronger than fear. He felt pride. He had once saved them with a warm meal. Now they were offering to save him from the life of silence he had endured. The sound of voices outside broke the moment. The crowd had noticed the silver glow at his door. Murmurs grew louder, footsteps gathered. The colony was realizing what was happening, and soon the world beyond would know. Arya looked at Daniel with calm determination. This is your choice. But know this. We came for you, and we will not leave without you. Daniel's breath caught. The walls of his room seemed to close in, but in their presence, the world opened wide. 10 years of waiting, of loneliness, of doubt, all led to this moment. And though fear clawed at him deep inside, Daniel knew the truth. He could no longer stay behind. The next day, the colony could not stop talking. Word had spread like fire. Two powerful rulers had come to the poorest part of the settlement, and they had entered the house of a human worker. People asked endless questions, but no one had answers. Inside Daniel's small room, silence still hung heavy. He sat at his table, staring at the silver locket Lyra had left before him. The faint glow of its markings seemed alive, as though it was pulsing with memories only he and the sisters shared. Arya stood by the window, watching the restless streets below. Her voice carried the calm command of a leader. The crowd grows larger every hour. Soon the officials will come. They will demand to know why we are here. Lyra turned to Daniel with gentle eyes. But they will not hear the truth. The truth is not for them, it is for you. Daniel rubbed his hands together nervously. The truth? What truth could explain all this? You built an empire. You command ships that make men tremble. How could that have anything to do with me? Arya faced him now, her gaze steady. Everything has to do with you, Daniel. You gave us the first kindness we had ever known. That night you did not see us as trash or beggars. You saw us as children worth saving. That belief stayed with us, even when the galaxy tried to erase us. Lyra sat across from him, her hands folded on the table. We were taken the next morning, sold into a chain of debts and slavery. But in our darkest hours, we remembered the bread, the blanket, the way you spoke our names. It gave us the courage to endure until we could escape. Daniel's chest tightened. He had imagined 1,000 endings for their story, but not this. He had never thought his small act could be strong enough to carry them through years of pain. We built from nothing, Arya continued. We gathered others who were lost, others who had been forgotten. We made a family out of the abandoned. Together we rose, one step at a time, until we became more than survivors. We became rulers. Her voice grew firmer, but her eyes softened. But we never forgot the beginning. You were the first to see us. You were the reason we believed survival was possible. Daniel shook his head slowly. I gave you food. I gave you a night of safety. That is all. You built the rest yourselves. Lyra leaned closer, her smile tinged with sadness. No, Daniel, without a seed there is no tree. Without you there would be no us. That is why we are here. We came to repay the debt. Daniel frowned, confused. Repay? I never asked for anything. Arya stepped closer, placing her hand firmly on the table. You never asked, which is why we give freely. From this day forward, you will not live as a forgotten worker in a broken room. You will live as our honored guardian, our family. You saved us, and now we save you. The words struck Daniel like thunder. Guardian, family, him. He looked at the cracked walls, the patched blanket, his tired hands. He was nobody. He was invisible. And yet here they stood, offering him a place beside them. He felt the weight of years pressing against him, the loneliness, the hunger, the endless labor, and then he felt the warmth of their promise brighter than the silver ship waiting outside. I don't belong in your world, he whispered. Lyra's eyes filled with quiet fire. You belong because you made it possible. You belong more than anyone. Before Daniel could respond, a loud knock shook the door. Officials had arrived, their voices sharp. Open up. By order of the council, you are to explain this disturbance. Arya's expression hardened. She motioned to Lyra, who pulled her hood back over her head. Stay behind us, she told Daniel. The door burst open and 3 armored guards stepped inside, followed by a sneering councilman. His eyes darted to Daniel, then to the sisters, and his mouth twisted. So it's true. The Orphan sisters in the company of a human laborer. How curious. Arya's silver gaze turned cold. Curiosity will end here. This man is under our protection. Speak against him, and you speak against us. The councilman faltered, sweat forming on his brow. Even hardened guards shifted uneasily under her stare. The weight of her words was heavier than any weapon. Daniel sat in stunned silence as the intruders backed out, mumbling apologies. The door closed again, leaving the room in quiet stillness. Arya turned to him. Her tone softened once more. Do you see, Daniel? You are no longer invisible. The galaxy itself will bow before the man who once shared a warm meal. Daniel lowered his head, his throat tight with emotion. He had never sought power, never sought glory. All he ever wanted was to live simply, quietly. But now, he could no longer deny it. His small act of kindness had grown into something too large to escape. For the first time in years, Daniel felt tears sting his eyes. He looked at Arya, then Lyra, and whispered, If this is my place, then I will walk it with you. And so the debt was repaid, not with coins or gifts, but with loyalty, eternal. The following days changed Daniel's life in ways he could never have imagined. His quiet, broken room that had once smelled of rust and damp walls now became a place of whispers, guarded by armored sentinels. People who once brushed past him, without a glance, now watched with wide eyes, murmuring about the mysterious human chosen by the Orphan sisters. Daniel did not understand it. He still woke up sore from years of labor, still felt the weight of his age, still carried the same rough hands that had lifted crates all his life. Yet now, wherever he walked, people bowed their heads. Children stared with awe. Merchants stumbled over their words to offer him food, gifts, even gold. It was strange, almost unreal. But when Arya and Lyra were near, he understood. They never treated him as a symbol. To them, he was still Daniel, the man who gave them bread and a blanket. In their presence, the noise of the colony faded, and he felt like he had stepped back into that night 10 years ago, when 3 broken souls shared warmth against the cold. One evening, they invited him aboard their ship. Daniel hesitated, but Arya extended her hand and he followed. The moment he stepped inside, he was swallowed by brilliance. The walls glowed with silver light, the halls stretched endlessly, and the air smelled of flowers from distant worlds. Servants bowed as he passed, whispering reverently, though Daniel felt only smaller with each step. They led him to a great chamber filled with stars. The ceiling itself was a window to the galaxy, showing endless constellations and the hum of distant nebulae. Daniel stood frozen, his mouth dry. This, Lyra said softly, is what we built. This is the family we gathered, the empire we forged from ashes. And all of it, Daniel, began with you. Daniel shook his head. I don't deserve this. I never wanted to be remembered. I only did what was right. Arya's silver eyes locked onto his. That is why you deserve it. You gave without asking. You gave when you had nothing, and that is the mark of greatness, Daniel. Not power, not wealth, but kindness. Her words struck deep. For years he had believed himself ordinary, a shadow in a galaxy of giants. But now he began to understand. His act had not been forgotten because it carried the one thing the universe had so little of: hope. News spread faster than light. Across colonies, across planets, across empires, people whispered of the human worker who had once saved 2 orphans with a simple meal. Stories grew, told and retold. Some claimed he was a prophet, others a hero of fate. In truth, he was still just Daniel, but legends do not ask permission before they are born. The council of the colony sent envoys trying to offer him riches to win his favor. Other rulers sent letters of respect, hoping to tie themselves to the sisters' legacy through him. Daniel wanted none of it, but Arya and Lyra reminded him gently, "This is not about what you want. This is about what you mean." At first, Daniel resisted. The attention, the praise, the weight of being a symbol, it suffocated him. But one night, as he stood at the balcony of their ship, looking down at the colony that had once ignored him, he saw something new. Children no longer begged in the streets. Merchants no longer kicked the weak aside. For the first time, the forgotten were being noticed. And he realized something. If his story could inspire kindness in others, then perhaps it was worth carrying. When Xiao, he returned to the ship's great chamber, Arya placed the silver locket back in his hands. "This is not only ours anymore," she said. "This belongs to the galaxy. You are part of its story now, Daniel. You are the man behind the legend." Lyra smiled warmly. "And no matter how big the legend grows to us, you will always be the man who gave us bread." Tears welled in Daniel's eyes. For 10 long years he had lived in silence, wondering if kindness mattered. Now, standing among stars, with 2 women who had once been starving children at his door, he finally knew the answer. Kindness mattered. It always had. And as the galaxy began to whisper his name, Daniel did not feel like a hero, or a ruler, or a legend. He felt like himself, a simple man whose single act had rippled through time and space until it became something eternal. For some, history would call him the guardian of the Orphan sisters. For others, the seed of hope. But to Daniel, none of that mattered, because in the end, he was only what he had always been, just a man who chose not to walk away.